Good afternoon. We have new information today to share with you regarding the ongoing independent investigation of Sheriff Christina Corpus. One of the key updates focuses on the text with homophobic slurs that Judge Cordell identified in her report as coming from the sheriff to one of the witnesses. The sheriff has repeatedly misled the public, saying the texts don't appear authentic. In fact, what the evidence tells us is they are. On the screen, in a moment, and also in the packets that you can be collected at the back of the door. What we have is a forensic report by Cellbrite, a company that uses the same technology as the FBI, that went ahead and actually looked at the text. We were able to obtain the cell phone from the witness who received the text and have that cell phone looked at forensically. And what Cellbrite has concluded that in fact those texts were sent from the sheriff's phone. I'm not going to go ahead and read those homophobic slurs. You can see them for yourself. But we are confident, based on the forensic report, that those texts were sent by the sheriff. Separately, this week we saw a November 14th memo from Undersheriff Dan Perea to the sheriff summarizing a highly unusual set of circumstances where Victor Ange gave the undersheriff a request. Now, this happened at a time where the board had already eliminated Victor Ange's position, meaning he had no authority to make this request. What the memo states is that Mr. Ange told the undersheriff he was concerned about the rifles in the safe. The memo states that then, according to the undersheriff, Mr. Ange stated, quote, "This is how they're going to try to get me." If you recall from Judge Cordell's report, she found Mr. Ange pushed for the executive team to have suppressed silencer rifles, even though Mr. Ange is prohibited from having access to such weapons. Now, at the time this request was made, there is an active investigation taking place into whether or not he has access to these rifles. And what happened is the undersheriff states that then Mr. Ange suggested that the undersheriff send staff home early and change the code to the safe. The undersheriff did not act on the request and told Ange henceforth to stop contacting him. To be clear, the undersheriff is the only member of the executive team besides the sheriff who has not resigned. And we have a copy. County is in possession of that document, of that memo, and we have corroborating evidence for that memo. Now, you may wonder, who are these people standing next to me today? Also on Monday, 5 of the captains in the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, the only remaining high-ranking staff outside the sheriff and the undersheriff, came together and unanimously called on the sheriff and the undersheriff to immediately resign. This is just the latest group of law enforcement professionals in the county to do so. We have a copy of the email. That will be provided in the back to the press, so you can go ahead and look at that email. There it is on the screen. I am joined today at this press conference by 2 of the 5 Sheriff's Department captains, Captain Myers and Captain Allen. I want you to take a moment and think about their bravery being here with me today with their jobs on the line, calling for their boss's resignation. The 11-19 vote of the captains calling on Sheriff Corpus to resign follows the November 13th call to resign from both the Deputies of Sheriff's Association, who represents all the deputies and correctional officers in the county, and the Organization of Sheriff Sergeants, which represents all of the sergeants and lieutenants in the county. Collectively, the leadership for all of the professional sworn law enforcement in the county and the captains in the county have called for Sheriff Corpus's resignation and for Undersheriff Correa's resignation. The two are literally left standing alone in the sheriff's department. The sheriff has lost the faith and trust of her team. We are in an operational crisis in the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office that is without precedent. Now, I expect Sheriff Corpus will claim, as she has done in the last week, and in response to the 400-page Cordell report, that she is fighting a conspiracy put together by an old boys network to stage a political coup. When she says this, Sheriff Corpus is simply not being honest with the residents in San Mateo County. First, 4 of the 5 captains who voted to ask Sheriff Corpus to resign are individuals she promoted to captain, some of them whom she brought to the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. On the screen behind me, I have the Sheriff Command, Sheriff Command structure. And in it, you can see the captains. Brian Phillip, who we'll talk about later, was a new hire. Captain Allen next to me was promoted by Sheriff Corpus. Captain Myers next to me, promoted by Sheriff Corpus. Richard Cheekhoff of Half Moon Bay, promoted by Sheriff Corpus. Bill Fogarty, promoted by Sheriff Corpus. All were her promotions. There was only one member of the captain's unit who was not, Frank Del Porto. Additionally, a 6th captain she recruited in San Mateo County, Matthew Fox, also has resigned. The 7th captain, Captain Albin, left the county and went to work for another. Under Sheriff Chris Young, whom she hired from an outside organization, also resigned. Assistant Sheriff Ryan Monahan, who the sheriff hired from outside the organization, was terminated from his position in circumstances Judge Cordell found and sustained as retaliation for his cooperation with Judge Cordell's investigation. When Sheriff Corpus claims to the media and residents of the county she is fighting an old boy network, she is being dishonest, as all of these law enforcement professionals, captains, undersheriffs, assistant sheriffs who resigned or were retaliated against and who are standing up to her now, all but one, were individuals she promoted or brought through this organization. Now, all of this dysfunction under her leadership and the relationship she has with Mr. Ange has brought, undoubtedly, is going to cost the taxpayers millions of dollars in lawsuits. Money that should have been used to help the hungry and the sick and the vulnerable in this county. Which brings us to Captain Brian Phillips, who I had not mentioned yet, only briefly. Before today, I could not confirm that he was the captain who refused the order to arrest Mr. Tapia. That he resigned in the face of that order. Litigation has now commenced, and he has brought a claim to the county as a result of that incident, and we are actually sharing the claim with all of you today. You can pick it up in the back of the room so that you can go ahead and review it for yourself, the circumstances of what happened on that day, in his words. San Mateo County taxpayers simply cannot afford the financial liability of a sheriff we cannot trust. We cannot afford the dysfunction from a sheriff we cannot trust. We cannot afford the effect to public safety of the residents in this county from a sheriff we cannot trust. We're calling on Sheriff Corpus again today to resign and to save the taxpayers of this county the cost it will take to remove her, which if she does not do, we will do. Thank you. Now Supervisor Corzo will be joining us to go ahead and provide remarks in Spanish.
Good afternoon. I will be speaking in Spanish, but not quite yet. Thank you for being here and continuing to be a part of informing our community. I regret not being with you in person today. While this matter is extremely time-consuming and distracting, our board continues to take our responsibilities very seriously, and our day-to-day commitments to our community continue. I'm currently representing our county at a statewide convening of supervisors, which is why I'm not with you in person, but I am with you virtually because this is the most pressing matter in our county. As a board, we remain concerned about our ability to ensure public safety under Sheriff Corpus's failed leadership. We are doing everything within our power to ensure that we can restore our community's trust in the sheriff's office, and we continue to call for Sheriff Corpus to resign immediately. You just heard from Supervisor Mueller about the latest developments regarding the sheriff's office, and I now want to speak directly to the Latino community in Spanish. Buenas tardes, gracias por estar presentes y seguir informando a nuestra comunidad. Lamento no poder estar con ustedes en persona. Aunque este asunto ha sido un gran consumo de tiempo y una distracción, nuestra junta sigue tomando muy en serio nuestras responsabilidades y nuestros compromisos diarios con esta comunidad continúan. Actualmente estoy representando a nuestro condado en una reunión estatal de supervisores y por esa razón no estoy con ustedes en persona. Este asunto es el más importante en nuestro condado. Seguimos preocupados por nuestra capacidad para garantizar la seguridad pública bajo el liderazgo fracasado del alguacil Corpus. Estamos haciendo todo lo posible para restablecer la confianza de nuestra comunidad en la oficina del alguacil y seguimos pidiendo la renuncia inmediata del alguacil Corpus. Ahora les diré en detalle la nueva información que tenemos para compartir con la comunidad. La tecnología confirma con pruebas forensicas definitivas que los repugnantes insultos homófobos descritos en el informe de la juez Cordell procedían de hecho del celular del alguacil Corpus. El alguacil Corpus ha negado haber enviado esos mensajes, pero lo hemos comprobado con la misma tecnología forénsica que utiliza el FBI. En un memorando del suboficial del alguacil Dan Perrea, confirma que Víctor Áñez siguió teniendo acceso a los rifles suprimidos y intentó dar instrucciones al suboficial Perrea para que él cambiara el código de la caja fuerte, incluso después de que ya no tuviera puesto o después de ya no ser empleado por el condado. Todo el personal ejecutivo del alguacil Corpus ha renunciado, todos siendo personal que ella misma contrató o promovió. Solo queda uno, el suboficial del alguacil Dan Perrea, y es muy claro que el liderazgo de la oficina del alguacil se sigue desmoronando. Todos los capitanes, dos quienes están con nosotros hoy, de la oficina del alguacil han tomado un voto de desconfianza contra el alguacil Corpus y su suboficial Perrea y están pidiendo que renuncien. El capitán Philip, quien renunció su puesto dentro de la oficina del alguacil, ha presentado una demanda contra el condado de San Mateo sobre la base de que se le ordenó injustamente arrestar al diputado Carlos Tapia. Esta es una de las muchas demandas que esperamos de los perjudicados por el alguacil y probablemente costará millones de dólares que el condado tendrá que pagar. Esta nueva información se suma a la creciente avalancha de pruebas contra el alguacil Corpus. Ella sigue negando lo que todos podemos ver con nuestros propios ojos. El alguacil sigue diciendo que todo esto está pasando porque ella es mujer y porque es latina. Eso no solo es mentira, también es un insulto a las personas que realmente viven esos tipos de discriminación. Quiero que la comunidad entienda que el alguacil Corpus ha fallado en proteger a las personas bajo su cargo, incluyendo oficiales juramentados y trabajadoras civiles que trabajaron bajo el cargo de Víctor Áñez. Varias de las personas que tuvieron el valor de reportar los abusos que vivieron son mujeres latinas, personas de color, hombres latinos y personas que han dedicado sus vidas a y apoyar a nuestra comunidad. Yo, en lo personal, no voy a quedarme con los brazos cruzados y permitir que el alguacil Corpus utilice a nuestra comunidad para esconderse y no asumir la responsabilidad de sus actos. Como comunidad debemos estar unidos contra las mentiras y la corrupción, especialmente cuando sigue perjudicando a nuestra propia gente. Por favor, les pido que lean el reporte y asegúrense en revisar la página 46. Por favor, lean el informe y asegúrense leer la página, la prueba 32, que también se encuentra en la página 327. Nuestra comunidad necesita líderes que sean dignos de confianza y que los protejan en los próximos años. Como alguacil, Christina Corpus sabe mejor que nadie, las pruebas hablan por sí mismas. La alguacil Corpus no es un alguacil en la que podemos confiar y debe renunciar ya. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Captain Myers, who will go ahead and provide a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I apologize, I got to pull up my notes. I just lost them real quick. I apologize. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Myers, and I'm a sheriff's captain here with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, and I serve as the police chief for the city of San Carlos. I'm here on my own time and off duty. Speaking for the sheriff's captains, the letter that our group has recently delivered to Sheriff Corpus speaks for itself. We stand here today in appreciation for Supervisor Mueller and the Board of Supervisors who have given a voice to the voiceless within our organization, and to show support for the men and women of the Sheriff's Office who continue to show up to work and do a tremendous job every day under difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I want to express thanks to the captains in the Sheriff's Office who stood together on this issue. The captains in the Sheriff's Office are located, for instance, in my district in San Carlos and Half Moon Bay. They work directly with our residents every day. Can't explain enough the import of them standing together and what this means to residents and to the board in understanding how significant the problem is in the Sheriff's Office at this time. This time we'll go ahead and open it up for some questions.
One second, please.
The captains won't be taking questions, so we respect the fact that they were able to come today just to speak at all.
Supervisor Corzo, she's still here?
Yes, she's still with us, I believe.
Supervisor, could you just give us a very brief synopsis of what you said to your constituents who were Spanish speaking? And I ask in particular because over the past weekend, there were some in that community who took to the airwaves to express support for the sheriff. And I'm wondering, are you worried that your movement to oust her could be fractured in that community, where there's some people who are supportive and saying Sheriff Corpus is doing good things and shouldn't be ousted?
A quick summary of my statements. I reviewed the information. I reiterated the information that Supervisor Mueller shared, and I also added that we are seeing with our own eyes the truth that the sheriff continues to deny. As a community, as a Spanish-speaking Latino community, I wanted people to understand, and I said in Spanish that Sheriff Corpus has failed to protect the people and the employees of the sheriff's office, including both sworn officers and civil employees, and specifically many women who worked under Victor Añez, including Latina women. I also named that there are many people of color, Latino sworn officers who have been impacted, and that every single person who came forward did so while also continuing to dedicate their lives to protect and support our communities. I said that I will not stand by with my arms crossed and watch our sheriff use the Latino community to hide and to attempt to evade taking accountability for her actions. And that our community needs to be united against lies, against corruption, especially when it's impacting our very own community as well. And I asked people to please look at page 46 and page 327 in the report, and I reminded the Spanish-speaking community that we need leaders who are worthy of our trust and who can protect us in the coming years, and that our sheriff knows this better than anyone, that the truth speaks for itself, and that she is not a sheriff in which we can trust, and that she needs to resign immediately.
For Supervisor Mueller, Deputy Tapia has been accused of some pretty serious crimes. I don't know in what stage that investigation is right now, but I firmly believe that this evidence has to be looked at like objectively, right? Like I'm a firm believer in innocent until proven guilty, but either way, by accusing as you implicitly did in a previous meeting, that this arrest was done purely as an act of retaliation, that's making a big criminal like accusation effectively against Sheriff Corpus, right? And what I'd ask of you is that if there is evidence, if there is considerable evidence that this investigation into serious crimes involving, as I understand it, significant amounts of taxpayer and county money, if there is evidence for this, it has to be looked into as impartially as possible, if necessary, by the law enforcement officials outside of the county. I'd implore you to do that, because regardless of everything else going on, and I do believe that there's
Drew, I want to jump in here and make sure that you actually have a question for us. I know there's a lot of people with questions, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Do you have a clear question?
Yes. What are you doing to make sure that's the case? If you do have an answer to that at the moment.
So what we have done is, as I indicated in our last meeting, this matter has been referred to the district attorney's office. It's in the process of being referred to the attorney general's office. It's in the process of being referred to the civil grand jury. With respect to the conditions under which Mr. Tapia was arrested, we pointed out the concerning conditions, that he was arrested without a warrant. Today, when you go ahead and review the statement of Mr. Phillips, you will also see other things surrounding the circumstances of that arrest, which I believe anyone who's being reasonable and rational will cause them to, and concern them, and make them understand that arrest did not happen within the procedural due process that we usually see within the county of San Mateo. Thank you for your question. We're going to follow up with someone else now.
Supervisor Mueller, can you explain some of the context behind the calls for Undersheriff Perea to resign? Is he viewed as complacent in all of the allegations of against Sheriff Corpus?
So certainly, if you go within the Cordell report, there is a discussion of some of Mr. Perea's conduct, but I think it's really important to go ahead and understand that there's actually been a call for resignation by the entire command staff. This investigation is ongoing. This is not, it's not like we did the investigation and stopped. And so certainly we'll be following up with command staff and those who have made the request for that resignation as well, to understand that more deeply.
And can you speak to the gravity of Victor's request to the undersheriff to change the lockbox code for the firearm safe?
Well, that's obviously an ongoing investigation that was pointed out by Judge Cordell as being possibly criminal in nature. To have Mr. Anjay, who that allegation was made against, to go ahead and actually make a request to alter the state of evidence, I think is something that would cause anyone great concern. Yes.
Could you talk about what the status of Mr. Anya's employment is with the county? Because I know obviously there was some question about whether he is or isn't, legally eligible to be assistant sheriff. And it sounded like in, that interaction with Mr. Perea, he had been inside of, a county building, and Mr. Callaghy had issued that order to, exclude him from county buildings. So what's the status there?
My understanding is that Mr. Ange was not in the building at the time that request was made. The county has taken the position he is no longer an employee of the county. My understanding is that Sheriff Corpus believes that in some capacity he may be still have a relationship with the county, but that is something that we do not believe the case at this time.
So she promoted him to assistant sheriff, but you're saying the board has overridden that promotion?
That's not what I'm saying. What happened is that to become the assistant sheriff, there are qualifications that are set forth by the Human Resources Department and policies within the department itself, the Sheriff's Department. The county has taken a position he does not meet those qualifications. We have informed the sheriff as such, and that is not a matter that we understand under contest at this moment. I also believe that there is a process being taken place that would show that permanence of full-time hire may not be in question anymore. The question, I think, there is still an ongoing question, I believe, of whether or not he's a reserve officer with the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, good afternoon, Supervisor Mueller. In the memo on the concern of the weapons being found in the safe, in Perea's memo, it says this is how he quoted Anya saying, "This is how they're going to get me." Tell me, the best we can do is speculate, but does that refer to a possible federal investigation, or is that do we know anything about that?
It would be unfair and speculative for me to state.
Okay.
Just following up on the suppressed rifles, you mentioned that there is an investigation. Is that a county investigation? Who is doing that investigation at this point?
Well, certainly there is an ongoing county investigation. The matter the entire report has been referred to the district attorney's office. It's in the process of being referred to the AG's office and is to the civil grand jury. Any other questions? With that, we can go, yes.
Could I ask you just to elaborate a bit on your comments on so-called old boys network? I understand, as you pointed out, that many of the people involved were newly hired by the current sheriff, but my understanding that term would not mean that someone who's newly hired is not part of an old boys network. We would want to look at their previous employment and previous connections. That would just be my understanding of the term. So, and what those previous experiences might lead them to tend to do. So could you elaborate a bit?
Well, respectfully, my understanding of it is different than yours. My understanding of what the sheriff has said repeatedly is that she is facing an institutional pushback from within this institution that existed from prior administrations. That is simply not the case.
Unfortunately, homophobia isn't illegal. So can you talk about kind of the importance of like still noting that and having that be a cause for concern of the sheriff and kind of what you want people to think about?
I believe a sheriff who makes homophobic slurs like that is not fit for office, period. Any other questions? Yes.
There's been speculation that there's federal involvement in this whole thing. Is there any truth to any agency federally involved in this investigation at all?
You'd have to ask federal investigators. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's time today. We can go ahead and we'll be made available.